My stepson's mom died 3 months ago. For Christmas, I bought him an $800 gift and my bio son something for $150. Everyone seemed happy. I thought I did the right thing. But then I panicked when I found out my son hadn't kept his gifts. Instead the wrapping paper was everywhere. Like a holiday crime scene, shreds of silver and red scattered across the living room carpet, bows stuck to the bottom of someone's sock, a piece of tape dangling from the dog's ear. And everyone was smiling. That was the thing. Everyone was actually smiling. I stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago, watching my 2 boys tear through what was left under the tree, and I remember thinking, I pulled this off. I actually pulled this off. Let me back up. My wife Karen passed away 3 years ago. Breast cancer. The kind that doesn't announce itself until it's already everywhere. We'd been married 11 years. She left me with our son, Marcus, who was 9 at the time and is now 12. And she left me with a version of myself I didn't recognize for a long time, a man who stood in grocery store aisles forgetting what he came for, who burned dinners because he'd walk away from the stove and just sit down somewhere and stare at nothing. But that's not this story. This story starts when I met Dana. Dana came into my life about 2 years after Karen died, through a coworker's barbecue that I almost didn't go to. She had a son named Eli who was 7 at the time. Eli's biological father had walked out when Eli was 2. Just left. Moved to Arizona, started a new family, sent a birthday card maybe once every couple of years with a check for $25 inside. The kind of father who existed only as a concept. Dana and I dated for about 8 months before she and Eli moved in. We got married the following spring. Small ceremony, backyard, Marcus as my best man and Eli as the ring bearer who dropped the rings twice and cried both times. It was perfect. For a while, things were good. Really good. Marcus and Eli weren't best friends. They were 4 years apart and had nothing in common, but they coexisted. They shared a bathroom without incident, mostly. They sat at the same dinner table. They tolerated each other the way brothers do when they don't share blood but share a roof. And then Dana died. Car accident. 7 months ago. She was coming home from her sister's house on a Tuesday night, took the turn onto Route 9 the way she always did, and a pickup truck running a red blew through the intersection and hit her driver's side door at 50 miles an hour. She was gone before the paramedics arrived. I got the call at 9:47 p.m. I was loading the dishwasher. Marcus was doing homework upstairs. Eli was watching something on his iPad in the living room. And in one phone call, the whole architecture of our lives just collapsed. Eli was 9 years old and had now lost both parents in any meaningful sense. His biological father was contacted and made it very clear through a lawyer that he had no interest in custody. No interest in visitation. No interest in anything that required effort or money. He signed over what little parental rights he had left, and just like that, Eli was mine. Not legally, not yet. That was still working its way through the courts. But practically, emotionally, in every way that mattered, Eli was my son. I was the only parent he had. I was the only adult in his life who showed up every single day, made his lunch, checked his homework, sat with him when he woke up at 2 a.m. crying for his mom. And I want to be clear about something. I didn't resent this. Not for 1 second. I loved Eli. I loved him before Dana died, and I loved him after. He was a sweet kid, quiet, a little anxious, the kind of boy who would come sit next to you on the couch and not say anything. Just lean his weight against your arm and breathe. He didn't ask for any of this. None of us did. So when Christmas started approaching, the first Christmas without Dana, I knew it was going to be hard. For all of us. But especially for Eli. Marcus was older. He'd already been through the loss of his mother. He understood grief in a way that no 12-year-old should have to. He'd built calluses over those wounds, not because he was cold, but because he'd had time. He still missed Karen. He always would. But he could function. He could laugh. He could sit through a holiday without falling apart. Eli couldn't. The weeks leading up to Christmas were brutal. Eli stopped eating breakfast. He'd push his cereal around the bowl until it turned to mush and then say he wasn't hungry. He started sleeping with the light on again. He asked me 3 separate times if I was going to go away too. Each time, I sat on the edge of his bed and told him the same thing: I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me. And each time, he'd nod, but his eyes wouldn't believe it. So I made a decision about Christmas. I was going to make it special for Eli. Not in a performative way, not in a let me throw money at grief way, but in a way that showed him he was seen. That he was wanted. That this family, whatever shape it was in, was still his family. I started shopping in November. I knew what Eli wanted because he wasn't subtle about it. He'd been obsessed with this particular gaming setup, a specific console bundle with a limited edition controller and a couple of games he'd been watching YouTubers play for months. He'd pulled it up on my laptop one afternoon and said, very casually, "This is cool, right?" The way kids do when they're terrified to actually ask for something. The whole setup was about $800. Console, games, extra controller, headset. It wasn't cheap. But I'd been saving, and Dana's life insurance had helped stabilize things, and I figured, this kid has lost everything. If I can give him one morning where he feels like a normal kid opening a present he's excited about, that's worth it. For Marcus, I got a nice pair of headphones he'd been wanting, the wireless kind, good brand, about $150. Marcus wasn't a big stuff kid. He liked music, he liked his headphones, and he'd specifically pointed these out at the store a few weeks earlier. It was a solid gift. Not extravagant, but thoughtful. And I'll be honest, I thought about the optics. I did. I sat at my kitchen table one night after both boys were asleep and I stared at my credit card statement and I thought, 800 versus 150. That's a big gap. Is Marcus going to feel slighted? But then I thought about it differently. Marcus had a stable childhood with two parents who loved him for 9 years before he lost his mom. He had memories. He had photos. He had a foundation. Eli had none of that. Eli had a father who mailed a check once a year and a mother who was buried in Oakwood Cemetery. Eli had me, and a bedroom that still smelled like Dana's perfume because I couldn't bring myself to wash the throw blanket on his bed that she used to wrap around him during movie nights. The math wasn't about dollars. It was about what each kid needed. So I went with it. Christmas morning came, and I was up at 5:30 making pancakes because that's what Dana always did, chocolate chip pancakes with whipped cream and those little sprinkles that come in a shaker. I found her recipe card in the kitchen drawer, her handwriting still sharp and tilted, and I followed it exactly. I even burned the first batch the way she always did and had to scrape the pan and start over. That part wasn't intentional, but it felt right. The boys came down around 7. Marcus first, because he was 12 and had that preteen energy that runs on adrenaline and skepticism. Eli came down about 10 minutes later, still in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes, looking like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to be excited. "Merry Christmas, boys," I said. Marcus said, "Merry Christmas, Dad," and went straight for the tree. Eli stood at the bottom of the stairs and looked at the living room like he was seeing it for the first time. The tree was lit up. The presents were wrapped. The stockings were full. I'd stayed up until midnight doing all of it because there was no one to help me anymore, and my back was killing me, but it looked good. It looked like a home that was trying. "Come on, buddy," I said to Eli. "Those aren't going to open themselves." He smiled. Small, careful, like he was testing whether it was safe. And then he walked over and sat down cross-legged in front of the tree. They opened their stockings first. Candy, small toys, gift cards. The usual stocking stuff. Both boys seemed happy, normal, fine. Then the big presents. Marcus went first. He tore off the paper, saw the headphone box, and his face lit up. "Oh, these are sick," he said, which in 12-year-old speak is the highest compliment available. He immediately opened the box and put them on and started nodding his head to imaginary music. "Thanks, Dad, seriously." "You're welcome, bud." Then Eli. I'd wrap the console box inside a bigger box because I'm a dad and that's what we do. Eli opened the outer box and frowned at the packing peanuts inside, and then he dug through them and found the actual box, and I watched his face go through about 6 emotions in 3 seconds: confusion, recognition, disbelief, hope, confirmation. "Is this," he looked at me. "Is this real?" "It's real." "The whole thing?" "The whole thing. Console, games, extra controller, headset. It's all in there." Eli didn't scream or jump up and down. He just sat there holding the box and his chin started trembling and his eyes filled up and he looked at me with this expression that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something deeper. It was a kid realizing that someone had paid attention. That someone had listened. That someone cared enough to give him the thing he was too scared to ask for. "Thank you," he whispered. And then he got up and walked over and hugged me, and he held on so tight I could feel his heartbeat against my ribs. And I had to breathe very carefully through my nose because I was not going to cry in front of these boys on Christmas morning. I was not. I did a little. But I turned my head so they couldn't see. Marcus watched this whole thing from the couch with his new headphones around his neck, and I looked over at him to check, because I'm a parent and I'm always checking, and he was smiling. Not a forced smile. Not a jealous smile. A real one. He gave me a little nod, like, "Yeah, Dad. You did good." And that was it. That was Christmas morning. Pancakes were eaten. Wrapping paper was cleaned up. Both boys disappeared into their respective corners of the house, Eli to set up his console, Marcus to his room with his headphones. The house was quiet in the way that only Christmas afternoon can be quiet, where everything feels temporarily solved. I sat on the couch with my third cup of coffee and I thought, okay. We survived it. First Christmas without her, and we survived it. I believed that for about 4 days. It was December 29th. I remember because it was a Thursday and I'd taken the week off work between Christmas and New Year's because I didn't trust the boys to be home alone all day without adult supervision, and also because I was exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. I was doing laundry. Marcus's laundry, specifically, because he'd let it pile up to the point where his hamper was overflowing onto the floor and I'd given him 2 warnings already. So I went into his room to collect it while he was downstairs watching TV, and that's when I noticed. The headphones weren't on his desk. Now, that might not seem like a big deal. Kids move things around. But Marcus was meticulous about his electronics. His phone had a specific spot on his nightstand. His tablet had a specific spot on his desk. His old headphones, the wired ones that were falling apart, always hung on the hook by his closet door. He was particular about this stuff. Always had been. The new headphones were nowhere in his room. I checked the desk, the nightstand, under the bed, the closet, the bathroom he shared with Eli. I even checked the shelf above his closet where he kept old board games and shoeboxes full of baseball cards he'd inherited from my father. Nothing. The headphones had been in this room 4 days ago. I'd seen them on his head Christmas afternoon, the big cushioned cup swallowing his ears, his head bobbing to whatever he was listening to. He'd worn them to dinner and I told him to take them off at the table and he'd rolled his eyes in that performative way that meant he was happy, not annoyed. A small knot formed in my stomach, but I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he'd taken them downstairs. Maybe they were in the couch cushions. Maybe he'd left them at a friend's house. Kids lose things. But something didn't sit right. I went back downstairs. Marcus was on the couch watching some YouTube compilation on his phone. I glanced around the living room. No headphones. Hey, Marcus. Yeah? Where are your new headphones? He didn't look up from his phone. What? Your headphones. The ones you got for Christmas. Where are they? There was a pause. The kind of pause that parents learn to read like a polygraph test. It lasted about 1 second too long. Oh. They're at Jake's. Jake's? Yeah. I let him borrow them. The knot tightened. Marcus didn't lend things. Not electronics. Not ever. When Eli had once asked to borrow Marcus's old tablet to watch a movie on a car ride, Marcus had said no so fast it was almost a reflex. This was a kid who put password locks on everything and once wrote his name on the inside of his shoes with a Sharpie so no one would mix them up at school. And he let Jake borrow his brand new $150 headphones 4 days after Christmas. I looked at him. He was still staring at his phone, but his thumb had stopped scrolling. When did Jake pick them up? I asked. I dropped them off yesterday. You walked to Jake's house? Yeah. In the rain? Another pause. It wasn't raining that hard. It had been pouring. I'd watched it from the kitchen window while making dinner. The streets were flooded enough that I'd moved the trash cans closer to the garage so they wouldn't float down the driveway. Marcus. Look at me. He looked up. And I saw it, that flicker behind his eyes. The one that says, I have a story prepared, but I'm not sure it's going to hold. Did you give Jake the headphones? I told you, he's borrowing them. When's he giving them back? I don't know, soon. Call him. Right now. Tell him to bring them back. Dad. Right now, Marcus. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he put his phone down on the couch cushion and exhaled through his nose in that way kids do when they're calculating whether the truth or the lie has a better survival rate. I didn't give them to Jake, he said. The knot in my stomach turned into a fist. Where are they? I returned them. I blinked. You what? I returned them. To the store. I stood there in my living room on a Thursday afternoon in December, holding a bundle of my son's dirty laundry, and I tried to process what he just said. My 12-year-old son had taken a Christmas gift, a gift I'd researched and purchased and wrapped, walked into a store, and returned it. How did you return them? You don't have the receipt. I used the gift receipt. It was in the box. Right. I'd left the gift receipt in the box. I always did, in case something was wrong with the product. And my 12-year-old had used it to return his own Christmas present. Where's the money? I asked. It went back on a store card. I stared at him. My 12-year-old son. Standing in front of me with his hands in his hoodie pockets and his jaw set in that way he does when he's already committed to a course of action and has no intention of reversing it. It was Karen's jaw. The same angle. The same stubbornness dressed up as calm. Where's the store card? He reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out a small plastic card, blue, generic. The kind they give you when you do a no receipt return or a gift receipt return. I took it from him and looked at the balance printed on the little sticker on the back. $157.42. $150 plus tax. Why? I said. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't even raising my voice. I was genuinely lost. Why would you do this? Marcus sat forward on the couch and clasped his hands between his knees, and for a second he looked so much like his mother that it physically hurt. Karen used to sit like that when she was about to say something she'd been thinking about for days. Because Eli needed it more, he said. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I saw how much you spent on his present, Marcus said. I'm not stupid, Dad. I know what that console costs. And I know what those headphones cost. And I'm not mad about it. I'm not. I think you did the right thing. Then why? Because I wanted to do the right thing too. He stood up and walked over to the bookshelf by the TV. He reached behind a row of books and pulled out a small bag, one of those reusable shopping bags, folded up tight. He brought it back and handed it to me. I unfolded it and looked inside. There were 3 things. A soft blue blanket, the kind that's ridiculously overpriced at those home goods stores but feels like a cloud. A framed photo, and when I saw the photo, my throat closed. It was a picture of Dana and Eli at the beach from 2 summers ago, both of them laughing, Eli on her shoulders. Marcus had printed it and put it in a simple wooden frame. And the 3rd thing was a gift card to the gaming store where I'd bought Eli's console, with a note attached in Marcus's handwriting that said, "For when you want more games, M." I looked up at my son. I used the money from returning the headphones, he said. The blanket was $40. The frame was like 12. The gift card is 100. I've got a little left over. Marcus. Eli cries at night, Dad. You know that, right? I can hear him through the wall. Every night. Sometimes more than once. And I just lie there and listen, and I didn't know what to do about it because I'm 12 and I can't fix anything. I can't bring her back. I can't make him stop being sad. But I thought, maybe if he had something soft to hold. Something that felt like being held. And maybe if he could see her face. Not just in his head where it gets blurry over time. I know how that works, Dad. I know because Mom's face got blurry for me too, but like, right there, on his nightstand, where he can see it when he wakes up. And maybe if he knew that we. He stopped. Swallowed. I wanted him to know it's not just you, Marcus said. I wanted him to know I'm here too. I stood there in my living room holding a shopping bag and a store card and a bundle of dirty laundry, and I felt something crack open in my chest that I'd been holding together with spit and stubbornness for 7 months. I put everything down on the coffee table. I sat down on the couch next to my son. And I pulled him into a hug that probably embarrassed him, because he was 12 and 12-year-olds have a complicated relationship with parental affection, but he didn't pull away. He leaned into it. When did you get so smart? I asked into the top of his head. I'm not smart, he said. I just pay attention. Yeah. He did. He really did. Have you given him any of this yet? I asked when I let him go. No. I was going to do it on New Year's. I thought, New Year, new stuff. Kind of symbolic or whatever. Or whatever, I repeated, and I almost laughed because he was 12 and trying to be deep and also trying to pretend he wasn't trying to be deep, and it was the most beautifully awkward thing I'd ever witnessed. Is that okay? He asked. Are you mad? Am I mad? That I returned the headphones. I looked at the store card on the coffee table. I looked at the bag with the blanket and the photo and the gift card. I looked at my son, who had taken his own Christmas present, the thing he'd wanted, the thing he'd pointed out in the store, the thing he'd been excited about, and quietly, without telling anyone, turned it into something for his stepbrother who couldn't stop crying at night. No, I said. I'm not mad. Okay, good. I'm going to buy you new headphones though. Dad, you don't have to. I'm buying you new headphones. That's not negotiable. He grinned. Just a little, okay. And Marcus? Yeah? Your mom would be really proud of you. Both of them. He looked away fast, the way boys do when they don't want you to see that something landed. He picked up his phone and started scrolling again, but I could see the corner of his mouth twitching, fighting a smile that he didn't want me to see. I took his laundry upstairs and put it in the wash. Then I went into the bathroom and closed the door and sat on the edge of the tub and cried in a way I hadn't cried since Dana's funeral. Not sad crying, exactly. Or not just sad. It was the kind of crying that happens when you realize that something good is growing in the middle of all the wreckage, and you didn't plant it, and you can't take credit for it, and it's the most terrifying and beautiful thing you've ever seen. New Year's Eve came. We didn't do anything big, pizza, a movie, sparkling cider and plastic champagne flutes because I'm a sucker for tradition. I'd thought about going to the neighborhood fireworks display 2 streets over, but Eli had flinched at a car backfiring last week, and I didn't want to push it. So we stayed in. The couch. The TV. The 3 of us under a pile of blankets because I kept the thermostat low and Karen would have murdered me for it and Dana would have just silently turned it up when I wasn't looking. The boys stayed up until midnight and I pretended to stay up until midnight but actually fell asleep on the couch at 11:15 and they woke me up for the countdown by throwing popcorn at my face. When the ball dropped on TV and the fake confetti fell and the crowd in Times Square roared through the speakers, Marcus looked at Eli and said, "Hey, I got you something." Eli looked confused. "It's not Christmas anymore." "I know. It's a New Year's thing. New year, new stuff." He went upstairs and came back with the bag. He sat down next to Eli on the floor and handed it to him, and I watched from the couch with my cold cider and my heart in my throat. Eli opened the bag and pulled out the blanket first. He rubbed it between his fingers the way kids do with soft things, automatic, instinctive, like they're testing whether it's real. "It's really soft," Eli said. "Yeah. It's for your bed. Or wherever. It's yours." Then Eli pulled out the frame. And his face, God, his face. He held the photo with both hands and stared at it, and his whole body went still, like someone had pressed pause. His mom was laughing in the picture, her hair blowing sideways, Eli on her shoulders with his arms out like he was flying. "Where did you get this?" Eli whispered. "It was on Mom's phone," Marcus said. And the way he said mom, casual, natural, like Dana was his mom too, did something to the air in that room. It changed the temperature. It rearranged something fundamental about who we were to each other. Eli looked at Marcus with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. It wasn't just gratitude or surprise. It was recognition. It was the look of a kid who had been carrying something enormous and lonely and had just realized that someone else was carrying it too. "There's one more thing," Marcus said. Eli reached into the bag and pulled out the gift card with the note attached. He read the note, "For when you want more games." And then he looked at Marcus again. "You didn't have to do this," Eli said. "I know. Why did you?" Marcus shrugged. The practiced shrug of a 12-year-old who has feelings he doesn't have vocabulary for yet. "Because you're my brother," he said. Like it was obvious. Like it was a fact he'd always known and was confused why anyone would question it. Eli put the photo down carefully on the carpet. He set the blanket beside it. He put the gift card on top of the blanket. And then he leaned over and hugged Marcus, and Marcus, who normally tolerated physical affection the way a cat tolerates a bath, put his arm around Eli's back and held him there. They stayed like that for a while. Long enough that the TV moved on from the countdown to some concert I didn't recognize. Long enough that my cider went flat. Long enough that I had to look away because there are some things a father isn't meant to watch without breaking. When they finally separated, Eli wiped his face with his sleeve and said, "Can we play the new games together tomorrow?" "Obviously," Marcus said. "With the extra controller?" "That's literally why there's an extra controller." Eli smiled. A real one. Not the careful testing smile from Christmas morning. A wide, unguarded, 9-year-old smile that reached his eyes and stayed there. They went to bed shortly after that. Eli took the blanket and the photo with him. I heard him setting the frame on his nightstand as I passed his door, adjusting it just so, making sure it was facing the right direction. Making sure he could see it from his pillow. I stood in the hallway between their two doors and listened. For the first time in months, I didn't hear crying through the wall. I heard Eli talking, quiet, barely audible, and I realized he was talking to the photo. Telling his mom about his new games. About the blanket. About Marcus. I went downstairs and sat at the kitchen table with the store card Marcus had given me. $157.42. The exact retail price plus tax of a pair of headphones my son had decided he didn't need. I ordered the same headphones online that night. Same brand, same model. They'd arrive in 3 days. Marcus was getting his gift whether he wanted it or not, because that's how this works. You don't get to pour yourself out for other people without someone pouring back into you. That's not how I'm raising these boys. Sacrifice is fine. Emptiness isn't. I sat there at the table for a long time after the order was placed. The house was quiet. The tree was still up. I'd take it down tomorrow, probably. The ornaments Dana had picked out were catching the last of the light from the porch lamp outside. Little glass things, cheap but pretty, the kind she'd buy on clearance in January and stockpile for the next year. She'd have loved this. What Marcus did. She'd have loved it so much. I turned off the lights and checked the locks and went upstairs. I paused at Eli's door one more time. Silence. Real silence. The sleeping kind, not the holding your breath kind. I paused at Marcus's door. I could hear the faint rhythm of breathing. Deep and even. A kid who'd done something good and was sleeping the sleep that comes from that. Heavy, total, clean. I went to bed. In the morning, I'd make pancakes. Chocolate chip, whipped cream, sprinkles. Dana's recipe. I'd burn the first batch. The boys would complain. I'd make a second batch and they'd eat too many and feel sick and lie around on the couch arguing about what to watch. It would be the first day of a new year. Same house. Same boys. Same grief sitting in the corners where it always sat. But the blanket was on Eli's bed now. And the photo was on his nightstand. And somewhere in this house, in the quiet space between two boys who were becoming brothers in a way that no court document or marriage certificate could manufacture, something had shifted. Something was holding. I didn't know if it would last. I didn't know if the crying would come back, or if the hard days would stay hard, or if I was doing any of this right. I didn't have a manual. I didn't have a partner to look at across the room and silently ask, "Are we okay? Is this working?" But I had a 12-year-old who returned his own Christmas present to buy his little brother a blanket and a picture of his dead mom. And I figured that was enough to build on.